Welcome into the Hard Fowl, everyone. I am Intern Joe, and with me today is my co-host, coming off the bench for Colin Taylor, Mr. Mike Yuva. Mike, how are we doing this fine Sunday evening?
I'm doing great. Watching all the Super Bowl highlights, a lot of good memories. Excited for some football next week, but I know we got a lot of basketball talk tonight.
Plenty of basketball to talk about. Most in particular, a lot of action this weekend with South Carolina men's falling to Arkansas, and obviously big win for the women, which we'll get into. But I guess, Mike, starting with the men's team, it's a tough start to the week with Mississippi State, double-digit loss in that one. Not really much to cover there other than, Mississippi State capitalized off of South Carolina's turnovers. And, again, it was more of the same for the Gamecocks there. And then, obviously, we had Arkansas on Saturday. That's a big game that, is worth talking about. Gamecocks lost 65-63 with Josh Gray putting up a prayer at the buzzer, and there's obviously some more drama regarding one specific player that we'll get into next. But it was a back and forth game, really, really, really tight towards the end. Michi caught fire in that second half. I guess, what did you see from South Carolina and Lamont Paris in that game? And I guess, what is your synopsis of it?
Well, I mean, look, we've talked about this, and it seems like as the season goes on, it's going to be a lot of copy and paste in terms of talking about this team. Because the reality is, and I've said this before, other than Gigi Jackson, Michi Johnson, the team's just full of SoCon talent. I mean, that's just called for what it is. The team just does not have the talent right now to be able to compete at the level that you need to be able to have that type of consistency. So, I bring that up just because we know that it's going to take some time. It's going to take some time to be able to turn this program around. With that all being said, this team just continues to show resiliency at times. And we've seen guys like, just use the example of yesterday with Josh Gray. Phenomenal game. I mean, goodness, the way he performed. So I say that because there's moments where guys step up. I mentioned Gigi, I mentioned Michi. But outside of those two, there's guys that have stepped up at times. It's just not the consistency that you need to. And because, like I said, when you don't have that talent across the board, and certainly you don't have that from a depth standpoint, it's going to put you in a real difficult spot. Kind of like having an old school wooden driver, Intern Joe. That sweet spot is just so freaking small. And if you don't hit it right on it, goodness, it's going to go flying left or flying right. If you do make some contact with it, good things can happen. And we saw some of those good things yesterday, but certainly it just wasn't enough. You need more consistency across the board. Gigi didn't have one of his better games in terms of the expectations that we have all placed on him. Chico Carter, I know he's been struggling at times, from a scoring standpoint. You need to be able to have more consistency from your starters.
Yeah, absolutely, Mike. And I like your point about Josh Gray. What a game from Josh Gray, career game for him. Lamont Paris had been talking about, leading up to this, just how much Josh has kind of come along, and this game seems like it had been a long time coming for him. And one thing I noticed with Josh is he is really a team player. In the post game interviews on Saturday, he was so defeated and everything like that. He was just really upset that they lost that game, and I'm sure he felt, a little bit was on him because of that last shot. But, I mean, when you have a career day like that, you would expect, especially with the way the season's going, you take a little bit of pride in that. But Josh Gray was very defeated and everything like that. So it shows you how much this team means to him. But, yeah, career game from him. He's been really working towards this. Lamont has been talking about this, how much potential he has. I think this is, the best we've seen him play yet. He finished with 20 points, 14 boards, 7 and 7, splitting the rebounds on the offensive and defensive end. I was really impressed with him on the offensive end, being able to box out and play like a true big man. Like, we hadn't really seen that, and that's what South Carolina's struggles have been so far this year, is really finding their identity in the post. They've struggled even the last couple of years to find a true 7-footer, and now Josh Gray stepping up in a big way. He's going to be a really big piece going forward for the rest of the year, and then next season too, if he returns, which I would assume he would. Just a really big piece. And another thing is, like, Hayden Brown, kept his hands to himself. This Arkansas game, we really didn't see him in any foul trouble, and he also had 10 points himself. So a lot of offensive rebounds for him too. 3 offensive and 1 defensive rebound. The guy was a menace on the defensive end. Arkansas came into this game, looking like they were going to try to control the paint a little bit. And, Hayden and Josh shut it down. And like I said, the one stat that really stuck out to me was, Arkansas's points off the bench compared to South Carolina's. Is South Carolina had 4 points off the bench versus Arkansas's 20. So it shows you that, when Hayden Brown and Josh Gray aren't in the game, there's a really big drop off. And 2, like even the guards as well, Zachary Davis and Jacoby Wright got a little bit of time. Jacoby Wright playing the most of it, tallied 4 points of his own. But I mean, yeah, I guess the big takeaway from this game is obviously Gigi, which we'll get into in a second here. But what a game from Josh Gray. And then again, Hayden Brown really, really, impressed me because he kept his hands to himself, stayed out of foul trouble, and played really good defense. Best he's played yet. It's kind of the best I've seen him play yet. You're right, Mike, in terms of like SoCon talent coming from the Citadel. It's big for him to step up in a game like that. And obviously they couldn't get it done, but it's a big game for him and a big spot for sure.
Yeah, and then the other thing too, and I mentioned it before about the consistency that you're looking for out of your starters. I mean, certain things that we saw yesterday, you mentioned Hayden Brown, and Hayden has been one of those sparks at times that when he is clicking, he's a lot of fun to watch. He's a lot of fun to watch when he can get going. I think the troubling part is, as I mentioned, right, when you don't have the talent across the board and you don't have the depth, it's going to show at times. And I know that you can get any stat, you can twist it and make it, come out any way you really want. But I think it's hard to hide the fact that South Carolina really struggled to get any production from their bench. I mean, just 4 points. Wright was the one that had all 4 of those. So I bring that up because, again, you're not going to have nights where Gigi Jackson's going to go out there and score 20 points or like he did a couple games ago when he put up 30. You're not going to have that every single time. You need other players to step up. Gray did a phenomenal job. No question about it. But even if you really want to get, crazy with it and kind of flip those points around and say, all right, those are Gigi's points that day, and that's what Gray had. Still, you need more from that. You need more from it. So, the question now becomes, where can they find some of those ways to be able to capitalize off of what they do have right now? I don't know if it's as simple as just saying, all right, they need to do this more, they need to do that more. I just don't think they have the talent right now. I really don't. I don't think they have the talent to be able to do it.
Yeah, Mike. And another thing that kind of stuck out to me about Arkansas is they really don't have a proven veteran on this team, right? Like Hayden Brown, obviously coming from the Citadel, but he hasn't played in big SEC games like that yet. And Josh Gray's still proving himself a little bit. So talk about a young roster, obviously with Gigi being 18. You really don't have a veteran that's been there before. And I think that's one of the biggest downfalls of this team is like you really don't have a voice. And even Lamont too, you can make a case for. Nobody really in this program has been in these spots. And so you don't have that experience level. And, it was missing yesterday, especially coming off the bench and whatnot. But yeah, one thing I noticed from yesterday is like you missed that veteran presence. You missed somebody who has been in those moments before to kind of get him over the hump. Obviously Michi was making big shots down the stretch. He was 5 for 6 in the second half. And, his only miss in the second half came in like the second to last possession, which that 3, I mean, it was a quick 3. I don't necessarily agree with it. I don't know if that's the way it was drawn up, but, certainly I didn't understand it, but yeah, this team is missing a veteran presence. And, I'm not calling out Lamont and saying he hasn't been there before either, but like, it's the SEC. It's different than, Chattanooga as well. It's just, there really hasn't been anybody in this program yet who's been through these spots. And it's just going to be the learning curve with Lamont's team and the way he recruits and the way he goes and gets guys too. Like, I'm sure he notices this too, Mike. I'm sure he noticed this, especially with the Gigi incident too. He doesn't really have a veteran in this room. And obviously you'd want Hayden Brown to be the vet, but again, like I said, he hasn't really been in these spots yet in the SEC. So it's interesting to look at for sure. And that's personally what I think they're missing, and what could have gotten them over the hump yesterday is a veteran for sure.
And we'll get into GG real quick, but I do want to mention one more thing about all that. I had a chance to talk to another head coach today at a different school, and I was just talking about rebuilds. And one of the things he mentioned is the toughest part about it all is you have to battle through apathy and the negativity that will come with it. And it's just part of it. And it's not just the coach. I think, Lamont Paris, I think he'll be able to handle it because he understands the territory. Now, it might be a bigger spotlight than he's ever been in before, right? It's not Chattanooga, but he knew what he was signing up for in that regard. So I bring that up because it's more so about the environment, the players that are in the system that you have, and the coaching staff, the guys that it's not even necessarily the number one assistant. It's the guy that could be, in charge of filming practice, whatever the case may be. So I bring all that up because that's the toughest challenge, he said, is making sure that everyone understands. And I think Colin asked a really good question the other day to Lamont about being able to work on the things that are in front of you, but at the same time, too, knowing that there's a much bigger picture down the road for that future. So that's something to keep an eye in mind, is that with South Carolina, with everything that's going on right now, like I said, you're not going to be able just to wake up tomorrow and say, all right, we're going to figure out the talent situation. It is what it is right now. That's just the reality of it. That's where they are right now. And I think that, with Lamont, what he's got to continue to do, and I feel like we've seen it at times, is he just needs to continue to push these guys, continue to love up on them. Because, look, you need to be able to coach. You need to continue to push them. You got to continue to be, a teacher, but you also need to realize, like, hey, look, we got guys in this system right now that, like you said, Intern Joe, they haven't been here before, right? And this is a challenge for them. No one's enjoying this. No one's enjoying this right now. No one enjoys losing, right? And that's why we're going to talk about GG in a second. No one enjoys losing. There's frustration right now. But you can't just throw in the towel right now. You still have a month to go of basketball. You still have a month to go. And if South Carolina can find a way to show some fight, and it's not even necessarily in the wins and losses, if they're able to show some fight, I think it's going to give this fan base a little bit more hope. Yesterday should have given you a little bit more hope. I'm not big with moral victories, but again, know who you are. Know who you are, okay? This is a team that's going through a rebuild. This is a team that does not have the talent across the board. Know who you are. And staying along those lines, Intern Joe.
Absolutely.
Of knowing who you are, if you want to get a home, you got to know who to call. And that person is Clint Hammond. Clint Hammond is the man to turn to over at the Mortgage Network. He does an outstanding job. He's been a long time sponsor and supporter of not just GC Live, but Gamecock Central. As we've mentioned before in the past, Clint has done a tremendous job with a lot of people throughout the Columbia area, people that people here might know of. One of those people being former Gamecock quarterback and captain Perry Orth. Buying a home right now, it's a crazy time. Clint can make that process a little bit easier for you. Give him a call at the Mortgage Network at 803-576-4450.
Yeah, absolutely, Mike. Love our guy Clint Hammond. And segueing into the next segment, obviously the big news out of the weekend is GG Jackson himself. I guess starting with how he played in the game, 9 points, 7 rebounds, no assists, and a block isn't the greatest stat line of all. And then obviously, his live stream that he has since apologized for after the game that definitely took some shots at some people. And, Mike, I'll let you get into it first. Take the first crack at it.
As I said yesterday when this happened, I don't think this story to me is some of the things that GG was saying. And the reason why is because, clearly GG was frustrated, right? In the Instagram live video. He's young, he's competitive, and he's still learning, okay? Does that excuse his actions? Not at all. And that's why there should be consequences for what he said, right? I mean, my coach in college would always say it in life, you have freedom of choice, but you don't have freedom of consequence. There should be consequences. And how Lamont Paris decides to go about that, That is his prerogative. And I'm sure that will be a question asked if we don't see anything done publicly, at least. But I say all that because I was most interested with him saying, I'm thinking about staying. To me, that's the story. To me, that's the story. Because, again, it's not excusing his actions. Like, let's not get it twisted. It's not excusing his actions when you say, oh, he's young, he's 18. No. Like I just said, there should be consequences for his actions, okay? Let's make that clear. But he's young, all right? What do you want to do? You want to put him in the corner? Put him in timeout, give him a spank? Like, what do you want to do? Really? Kid made a mistake. The big thing to me is he's thinking about coming back. And from talking to people in the know, that's the biggest takeaway to them. Are some of them disappointed in what he said? No question about it. Or what he did? No question about it. But what he said, those things happen more times than not across the country, not just in Division I, but Division II, Division III. I can promise you, I've been in locker rooms like that. You know what the difference is? Outside of the fact that Gigi has a platform, this thing right here, social media, it's changed the game. And to be honest with you, Intern Joe, I'm kind of surprised that we haven't seen more kids do this, okay? Again, that's not right. I'm not excusing it. I'm not making excuses. He screwed up. He needs to pay the consequences for his actions. However, are we surprised? Put Gigi aside the name, okay? Are we surprised when we say a young kid made a dumb mistake? To me, I'm not surprised when a dumb kid makes a mistake because they're young. They're learning to mature. He's having to mature a little bit faster than other 18-year-olds, just turned 18, just because of the platform that he has. He's going to make mistakes. We all made mistakes when we were 18 years old. Shoot, some of us are still making mistakes into our 20s, 30s, 40s, whatever. So again, what I'm trying to get at is that doesn't surprise me. It's a story. It's a story with what he said. That's why we put it up on the forum on Gamecock Central. But to me, the bigger story was something that no one knew about. No one had heard publicly, at least, which was, I'm thinking about staying. That's the biggest thing I took away from everything yesterday, to me at least.
Yeah, absolutely, Mike. And I think you're hitting the nail on the head there. Obviously, you don't want your star player going into, because it wasn't in the men's locker room, clearly, because it was right after the game. It came, so close following the game. It's not like the locker room would have cleared out. So he went somewhere else and, kind of just voiced his frustrations. And, people do that, right? Like, you're right. It's a young kid making mistakes. He just turned 18 too. So he didn't really even get a senior year of high school basketball, and so there is no, and Mike, we were talking about it too. There isn't anybody on this team that has been through this situation. So there is no real veteran leader that can lead a guy like Gigi through the steps and through how to handle this stuff. He's an 18-year-old kid with all the hype behind him, going into this whole year and everything. And obviously there's going to be expectations, and expectations weigh on you, especially as they get higher and higher and higher. So obviously he's got some frustrations. And I mean, sitting courtside in press row, you can see it up close and personal. Like, the kid is very, very passionate about his game. But, Mike, you're right. I think if you're going to take anything from it, right, it is going to be that part about, him thinking about staying, whether or not he said it in spite, of kind of, oh, I was thinking about staying, kind of like, now I'm not kind of thing. Whether he said it out of spite or not, means he's thinking about it.
It's on his mind. And the other part about it too is this, okay? This is something that has drove me nuts, okay? When you have small clips of things, because obviously there's been videos, there's been small clips that have been kind of surfaced on social media, okay? You don't get the full context of it all. You don't have the other comments that were made that were actually praising his teammates, okay? So I bring some of that stuff up because, the way I took it was he is a competitor who wants to win. He is sick and tired of losing, right? He is sick and tired of losing and wanting to have the ball more. Now, again, those are things that you have conversations behind closed doors with your coaches, okay? There's no question about that. Like, let's not get that misconstrued. But based on what took place, I didn't view it as a slap in the face to Paris or his teammates.
Oh,
I viewed it more as just the competitor wanting the ball. Again, should never have done that publicly. Should never have done that publicly. But how naive? How naive do you have to believe? Have to be if you believe that this stuff is not taking place across the country in other locker rooms.
oh
The
yeah.
only difference is he went public with it. Again, dumb mistake. Should be consequences for it. But let's not act like young players don't do dumb things, aren't thinking things like this. It does. It happens. And like I said, I'm surprised it doesn't happen more just because, like I said, we live in an era now where social media has become the norm. And with NIL and a lot of players having larger platforms, probably now than ever before, I'd say, it's going to be something to keep an eye on. And you need to monitor it. It was a dumb thing that he did. No question about it. I think it was very mature of him to come out right away, though, because as many people want to probably say, oh, well, he's just saying that because, he probably got yelled at. And it would have been real easy for him to say, you know what, screw it. From everyone that I've talked to in the know, he came in there, all right, he talked to Paris, and he's like, you know what, I screwed up. He didn't fight it, because I've been around athletes like that, not just teammates in college. I've covered athletes like that, where they think they're untouchable. They think they're invincible. They think that they cannot make a mistake, that if they did something, they'll try to twist the words around and try to get out of it. That wasn't the case. Gigi's like, you know what? I screwed up. And he went public with his apology. So again, let's not make this bigger than what it is. He screwed up. There should be some type of punishment. But again, I think if anything, there's some like little positive that came out of it all, which is maybe Gigi's thinking about staying.
Yeah, absolutely, Mike. And getting to, I guess, Big Red's question here. Yeah, it does warrant some kind of disciplinary action because, yeah, he made a mistake. He did call out his coach. And he went, out of the team locker room on by himself to do something. So, yeah, I mean, the disciplinary action might just be, him not getting the start or something, maybe a minutes. I don't know. I mean, I'm not Lamont. I'm not in his head. I don't know what kind of, weight this carries.
But you agree, though. You agree. There needs to be something, though. You send a message.
Absolutely. Yeah, there needs to be something happening. And, it's just, kid making
a message. Because Intern Joe, you send a message here because, look, it's really easy.
Too.
Well, it's really easy to look at Gigi Jackson and use him as an example. I mean, the fact that we're talking about him makes it a little bit easier instead of saying, oh, if this was Gigi. I mean, this is, for all intents and purposes, this is the face of your program right now. Okay. This is the face of your program. This is one of the best players in the country. So by doing that, again, like you mentioned, Intern Joe, whether it's not starting, whether it's sitting out the first half, whatever the case may be, I don't know what it's going to be. I don't know what the punishment's going to be. You do that, not only are you sending a message to Gigi, you're sending a message to the rest of the team. So for anyone that's worried about, is Gigi coming in there thinks he's better than the team? I think the players already know that this kid's better than them. I mean, like, come on, let's be honest with ourselves. And he's probably going to get away with certain things just because there's in life, right? When you're dealing with, I mean, I say life, but I mean, you can do it in life as well. But when you're dealing with athletes, some of the better players, there will be times that they will be able to get it. The leash will be a little bit longer, I think is the best way to put it. Okay. Yeah. Gigi's not going to get away with this completely. Okay. There's going to be some type of consequence, and there should be. Yeah. But I think it sends the message to the rest of the team as well as Gigi. But I also think too, this is a golden opportunity for Lamont Paris to show the type of coach that he is. And it's not having to be a hard ass or, but are you going to let kids come in here and say whatever the heck they want? So that's what I'm trying to get at too, is that it sends the message about the coach that you want to be at South Carolina.
Yeah, Mike, I was about to get to that. All I've heard so far is, because if you look at how Frank Martin was, right? Frank Martin,
exactly. He's not here anymore. No. Stop talking about your ex. Your ex is done.
This is what I'm saying is like Frank Martin was very hard-nosed and scream at you, get in his face and whatever. Yep. And all I've heard is Frank wouldn't have let this slide and Lamont's a pushover and all of this stuff. But I mean, I think that's why we'll see it. And one thing with that too is why Lamont looks like a pushover is because Frank screamed at his players up and down the floor. Like,
Isn't
Frank,
that funny though? I mean, I don't know what you think. That's why I always laugh. Like now people are saying, "Oh, Frank wouldn't let this happen," and they're
I
probably the
do,
same people that were crying that Frank was friggin' yelling at their kids. Hey,
I
by the
do.
way, and I'm not trying to make this into a whole Frank Martin thing. He's not here anymore. But real quickly, he was on Chris Silva harder than probably any other player on the team, right? And it worked out. It led Chris Silva to be able to go to the NBA. He's been able to do some great things, and Chris has been so great before that. So I say all that because that was Frank Martin's coaching style, okay? It's done with, though. He's not here anymore. Now you have Lamont Paris. Paris has his own coaching style. He's not going to do the things that Frank does. That is just that Frank is Frank, Lamont is Lamont, okay? Regardless of how you like each coaching style, they're different. But the thing about it, Intern Joe, is, okay, he has an opportunity to send a message. He doesn't have to be doing the things that Frank does because, again, that's Frank. I love Frank for being Frank. That's who he is. He's a Cuban from Miami. He is Frank, baby. That's why I loved about Frank. We're still figuring out who Lamont is, okay?
And
this is a good opportunity for him.
Yeah. Again, he has a chance to show the fan base like who he is and how he handles things.
Exactly.
Obviously, so far we have seen that he is more of a player's coach, but that is why this group has liked him. You know, I've heard nothing but positive things, minus the one GG outburst that came after a game and all of that. But in terms of what Coach Paris is like inside the building, I've heard nothing but positive things from the players so far. And obviously, maybe that hasn't leaked yet or whatever. But everything that I've heard is nothing but positivity around how Coach Paris coaches and how he handles his players too, and you know how he's a little bit more. And he, again, like I say this, he's gonna seem gentle and soft because of how hard Frank was. But
yeah,
you know, Coach Paris, he's a player's coach, and I think that's it's kind of what this program needs. And you know, he's gonna show the fans, show the fan base, show the rest of the program, whatever he decides to do with Gigi, that will be, you know, his standard going forward. And I think, you know, Gigi's action, I guess you will, is a very basic infraction, right? It happens everywhere. It happens everywhere. Guys get frustrated, especially after a tough game like that. You lose at the buzzer, man. Like, obviously, guys are going to be pissed off. So this is like the first minor infraction that we have seen, especially in Lamont Paris's teams, and especially with your star player Gigi Jackson, who, you know, has been up and down all year and, you know, been, you know, really, really emotional in games and stuff like that. And Lamont has been, you know, doing his best to work on him and prepare him for the NBA. But again, Mike, the takeaway here is one, he's thinking about staying, and two, like Lamont is setting the foundation and showing everybody like how he is going to handle things, and that he's not afraid to put the foot down, and that he's not a pushover. Because that's all I've heard and all I've seen on Twitter too. So all the people on Twitter that are saying Lamont's a pushover, like, you know, Frank would have never let this happen. Come on. Lamont didn't know it was happening because Lamont was in his presser.
An Intern Joe, I do want to mention this other thing too, right? There's no question that Gigi, in terms of his status, in terms of the spotlight that's been on him for the last couple of years, we understand. And Lamont understands that. Coaches across the country, when they deal with players like that, they understand that, okay? There's a different level of pressure, right? But you also add in the fact that he's coming here, the youngest player in college basketball. He's learning a new system. You have a new coach learning his players. He's trying to figure out ways to win. He's got multiple things to worry about, right? It's not always as simple as being able to say, okay, we're going to pull Gigi aside and we're going to be able to coach him up every single day to show him exactly what it's like to not just be in college, but to be a college athlete, to be a college basketball player, to be a college basketball player who everyone is looking at to be the guy, and just keep going down the list. That's going to happen over time, okay? There's no question about it. But when you have a new coach, right? When you have a new coach, it's kind of like being in a new house. You can have some people in this house, but you're still trying to figure out what the whole situation is with the house. Where's the bathroom? Where's the back room? Where's this and that? Lamont's trying to figure all these things out. So I bring that up because maybe Lamont, he would say, you know, I wish I could have done things a little bit differently. I know they have multiple people on their staff that work with every player. But what I'm trying to get at is, you know, while all this is going on, sometimes you're also trying not to overload a player,
Yeah.
especially that young. So maybe it was one of those things that they figured, okay, you know what? He'll mature in this manner. He'll do this and that. And again, I don't think this is the end of the world. I think it's going to be all right. I think it'll be overblown a little bit by some people in the fan base. I understand it. But I think more than anything, I think it's going to be something that will lead to be a positive. As cliche as that sounds, not only will it be a positive for Gigi, I think it's going to be a positive for this team. It's going to be a positive for Lamont because, as you mentioned, this is going to be an opportunity for him to really be able to show who he is as a coach in terms of how he handles stuff like this. And you pray to God that you don't have to deal with stuff like this, right? We saw it with football and Shane Beamer's going through it. And obviously some of that is out of his control, depending on what the circumstances. Obviously this is, night and day different, right? But we're still talking about, make a mistake, you're going to get, there's going to be consequences. This is his opportunity to be able to show that to not just the rest of the team, but I think to the fan base as well.
Yeah, Mike, absolutely. And I mean, I think it's going to be a big learning experience for Gigi too, to kind of make him realize that he can't go all, I guess, willy nilly, if you will. Like it's not Gigi does whatever Gigi wants. And I think, reading his apology really quickly, and I mean, it's kind of short and sweet. I think he's kind of humbled by the incident, believe it or not. And I think it's good for him. I really do. I think it's going to really, really help him. In the long run, because it's going to help him take his actions a little bit more seriously. And it's just something that we have been waiting to see. Like, obviously, I know some fans I've seen it on socials. Is like Gigi he gets in his head sometimes during games. And I think, that Instagram Live is kind of the culmination of all that frustration. He had 9 points against Arkansas, and one of his biggest complaints is that he wasn't getting the ball down the stretch. And yeah, he's right. There was one or two plays in the last 2 minutes that he didn't have the play drawn up to, but that last play, Lamont had clarified that he was supposed to get the ball there. It wasn't supposed to be Josh Gray. Arkansas switched on it weird, and Gigi just had to get open. So to the people saying that, Gigi was supposed to get the ball on the last, or didn't get the ball in the last play because Lamont didn't draw it up to him. No, that's, Lamont was trying to get the ball to Gigi, and Gigi was supposed to take that shot or at least get a floater going in, but try to get fouled. There were a bunch of different options out of it, but I think the biggest thing for Gigi moving forward is that it's going to teach him that he needs to take his actions a little bit more seriously. And just people are watching, and people will analyze everything that he does, and especially in the NBA will not put up with this kind of stuff.
Well, it's not even about. I mean, look, if this were to happen in the NBA, depending on and again. I mean, we hear language. I mean, I've been in a college locker room playing, before. I mean, you hear things. Okay, this isn't me saying this. I'm saying objectively.
Yeah.
If this is in the NBA, he could be getting hit with the fine because of language that he used in social media and certain things like that, right? So there's consequences with that. The real thing that would happen though is it would piss off his teammates. There would be a veteran that would grab him probably by the collar, pin him up against the wall, and be like, you got to cut the crap. Okay. As you alluded to, I don't know if they really have any of those guys in there. I know Hayden is is a veteran. He's not, obviously, he wasn't playing at South Carolina last year, and I know that, I got to be careful with my words because someone's going to get offended. But I mean, it's the God's honest truth. Someone needs to grab him by the collar and say, hey, cut the crap. All right. Grow up. I think the message is loud and clear, though. I think he understands from talking to people close to the situation, based on the conversation that he had with Paris. The message was sent loud and clear. But I think the other thing too is, look, one thing that shouldn't be overlooked, and I think this is a good lesson, good teaching moment. We talk so much about NIL, right, with student athletes. And while Gigi, again, maybe he is just the one and done. Maybe he's only here 1 year. I don't know. But let's say he does want to come back next season. This doesn't help you from an NIL standpoint, right? We talk about brands, all right? Never mind the fact of what should be the most important part of it all, which is being able to go out there, help your team, be able to win games, all that kind of stuff. You can raise your draft stock for whatever sport you're playing, in this case, basketball. But you're not going to help yourself out, too, from a branding standpoint. This is not good in terms of being able to, build that image up, right? And again, I'm not saying you got to be squeaky clean, altar boy. No. But again, there's other layers to it, other reasons why you shouldn't do this stuff. Because from a business standpoint now, this isn't something that we would necessarily be talking about a couple of years ago, Intern Joe. Now, these athletes are getting paid. And I'm not saying it's going to, throw off any opportunities that he has from an NIL standpoint. But I mean, shoot, if there's an opportunity that was out there before, maybe there's a company saying, you know what, I'm not interested as much. I don't. So again, this isn't speaking specifically about Gigi. This is just in general that things like this, never mind the impact that it can have on a team, but it could also have an individual impact on your NIL brand.
Yeah, absolutely, Mike. Absolutely. Before we get into women's hoops talk, and that was a good spot to close the GG talk. We might get into it at the end. If you guys have questions, hit us. We have a little Q&A segment at the end. But before we get into women's basketball talk, got to talk about taxiety. Taxiety is that uncertain feeling you get right before you doing your taxes, but you don't have to go through it alone. The team at Liberty Tax and Irmo, Lexington, and Columbia will walk you through the process, clear up any confusion, and guarantee you'll get the biggest possible refund or your money back. It's tax time. If you're in a hurry for your refund, call the team at Liberty Tax. Fast, accurate, and guaranteed. On the other hand, if you think you might be owing Uncle Sam, talk to the Liberty Tax team to make sure you're not paying more than you should owe. They'll find every possible deduction for you. Locally owned and operated, staffed by tax professionals from your neighborhood. Open 9 to 9 on weekdays, 9 to 5 on Saturdays, with multiple service options. Start through the Liberty Tax mobile app or through the desktop portal. Make an appointment or just walk in. Give a call to upload your tax documents, and when you come in, your return will be ready to review and sign. Again, their number is 803-462-5576. 803-462-5576. Give them a call for all of your tax needs, as it is tax season, Mike. And as we segue into a brighter spot when talking about Gamecock basketball, South Carolina women's teams and Dawn Staley remained undefeated today against UConn. Tough one, really, really tough one, but they escaped, Mike. Big win for Dawn and her squad.
Great opportunity to be able to come up here. Not a place that they have had success before, right? I mean, this is a place that they were finally able to get that monkey off their back by being able to win in Connecticut. And it's huge. It's huge for multiple reasons. I mean, sure, Paige Beckers isn't out there, but at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. I mean, you're going into a hostile environment, a area that cares about college basketball, right? I mean, we understand how important it is down in Columbia, South Carolina. And I'd say there's a few places out there that really care about it. I mean, the sport, no question about it, is growing. But UConn is certainly one of those places. I mean, I work with a guy that up here in Boston that is obsessed with UConn athletics. It doesn't matter what it is. And they were talking about the game, and they were all excited about it. And, I bring that up because I think it's important to always realize these firsts. We talk about the first being able to go up there and be able to finally win in Connecticut. But on top of that, you improve now to 23-0, something that has never happened in program history, right? Because I think it was the 2015-2016 season. South Carolina started the year off 22-0. Then they had to play Connecticut. Well, what happened? They lost to Connecticut, dropped to 22-1. Still a very good season. Only had 2 losses that year. The whole point I'm trying to get at is USC has been incredible the last couple of years, but yet they're still achieving first. And I think that just speaks volumes of how high the ceiling really is for this program, not just this year. As far as this year goes, though, I mean, man, I think the fight that you saw with Aaliyah Boston wasn't really able to get things going in the first half, has a strong second half. I think it just sums up who this team is that they have the ability to really turn the switch on whenever they want. Now, when you're 23-0, a lot of people will look at it like, oh, there's no problems. There's going to be flaws. There's going to be flaws with this team. That's okay. We can talk about it. We can be critical about it. They need to find ways to be able to be more consistent right from the jump. We've seen that over even the last couple of years, right? Where they don't put a full game together. And that's difficult, right? Every coach says that that's what they're looking for. But sometimes we've seen this team come out very slow at times, very slow, or they come out hot and they go through this little funk in the second quarter. They need to be able to find ways to just be consistent early. And if they can do that with the talent that they have, I think that they're talented enough. I think that they're, honestly conditioned enough based on the speed that they also have. I mean, Aaliyah moves very quickly for a girl that size. You know, I mean, even some of their big. So what I'm trying to get at is if you're able to put yourself in a good position early on in games, they have an opportunity to really be able to run teams out of off the court in the fourth quarter. So again, more of a look at today, but big picture as well at kind of what they've been doing this season and just the history aspect. Again, first time program history, 23-0.
Yeah, Mike, it's huge. Very big, very, very big win up there in Stores. First time they've beaten Connecticut in Stores, I believe. Big day for Aaliyah Boston, 26 points, 11 boards. I mean, double-double from the double-double queen. You almost expect it at this point, Mike. What she is doing is, working her way to another Naismith Award honor. All intents and purposes, it will and should be her if she keeps playing at the rate that she is. We coming into this game, we knew she was going to be a big, big part of it because, with Paige Beckers being out, they were missing some post presence a little bit. And, Colin and I said it last week. UConn was they're one ankle injury away from either of us playing center for them, So with a banged up UConn team, they gave South Carolina a run. And, what really stood out to me, Mike, was the bench and how the bench was able to, really come on and play good, solid minutes for South Carolina. Like Raven Johnson played the bulk of the game after not starting. And, I love what Dawn's doing with Kiera Fletcher and Raven Johnson, two really, really talented point guards. And Kiera obviously being the vet and Raven being the younger one. They're both really talented. Both can kind of do the same thing. Same skill set. Both of them, can dribble, can shoot, do it all really. But I mean, the bench, and it was funny when we had Wellbaum, our guy Chris Wellbaum, our women's basketball beat reporter for Gamecock Central. When we had him on here, he said that South Carolina's reserves could probably be a top 10 team, which is kind of funny to think about, but it's true. And today proved it. Even though Raven came off the bench, she and Kiera flip in terms of that starting role, but big day for Camila Cardoso as well. Again, like UConn was banged up. They've been banged up, especially down there in the post. So we knew, it was going to be a big, big day for South Carolina's, girls down in the post. And sure enough, it was. One thing also, too, that impressed me, I guess, is the second quarter from South Carolina, the way they responded from, being down 9 being down 11 after the first quarter. They came back in the second quarter and outplayed UConn 20-9. Defensively, that's ridiculous. And we've seen that with a lot of Dawn's teams, that they can play defense up and down the floor. Like they will face guard you. They will do, whatever, cause matchup nightmares. And sure enough, they did exactly that. Another takeaway from today's game, Mike, 44 fouls. In today's game, obviously, I don't know if anybody watching has seen, or if they watched the game, they saw Gino Wariema get teed up. I unfortunately was at the baseball scrimmage, so I was watching it a little bit of both. But Gino Wariema's tech in the fourth quarter certainly gave South Carolina a little bit more life. And, Gino had been complaining about the officiating when in reality, I think the line was South Carolina was called for 23 and UConn was called for 21 or vice versa. I don't know. The line was close, but 44 fouls even, really, really, really tough day. They weren't really letting them play a lot, which I'm actually kind of surprised by, you would think.
Typically they do.
Exactly.
They do. I mean, especially in the regular season games. I mean, look, the funny thing about it is I have to go back and double check, but I believe that is the most fouls that South Carolina has been called for in a game this season. That's the ironic part about it all. So if Gino's upset that UConn was getting called for so many fouls, I have to go back and listen to exactly the way he phrased it.
Yeah.
If he's upset about that, it's like, okay, But at the same time, too, like you mentioned, it was very even. Whether you agree, you know what it's kind of like? It's kind of like, a baseball game where the umpire, the strike zone's just not it's not great, but it's at least consistent, right? He's calling that outside edge for both teams. You know what I mean? That's the way that I look at it, is that, okay, I understand the frustration with the stop and go, stop and go. I understand all that, especially on your home court, because you feel like, some of those calls hopefully will go your way. Maybe the crowd will be able to have some influence on it. But let's not act like it wasn't going both ways. Again, everyone was getting that call in that outside corner for that baseball analogy. It was happening both ways. So I think South Carolina, they could have, obviously handled things a little bit better from the free throw line. I think it's funny. That's one of the first things that everyone will always go to, right? It'd be like, they should have done a little bit better from the free throw line. I felt like when they needed to make some of those shots, they did. But I mean, look, again, when you're trying to nitpick and you're trying to find ways to be like, okay, what can you say about this team? They're 23-0, best start in program history, 29 straight wins, first win in Storrs, Connecticut. You got to be able to find something. Yep. And I think, like we mentioned, get fouled that many times, you need to be able to find ways to convert those free throws so that this game isn't as close as it was. They were fortunately able to get things going. And again, as we mentioned before, too, finding ways to just get things going a little bit earlier. Don't put yourself in a deeper hole, because, as you mentioned, Intern Joe, this team is beat up, right? UConn is beat up a little bit. Still a very good team. Still a very impressive win on the road. But do what you can to be able to, help yourself out, because, as we know, a month from now, things are going to really pick up, right? Mm-hmm. Not that the LSU game, the LSU game is going to be incredible too, but it's only going to get tougher is what I'm trying to get at. And you don't want to put yourself in situations where you're so behind and, it's not going to always work out that way if you're playing against better competition as the season goes on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I guess looking ahead to LSU, they're kind of really the only team that stands in their way before you get to the SEC tournament and the NCAA tournament. And so, LSU is also undefeated. They'll most likely enter that game undefeated. That game is coming on Super Bowl Sunday. So next weekend, this next upcoming weekend, there's one more game in between for both. But I think that the LSU game, if you can't find anything to play for in that game, man, you're not an athlete. Like, freaking LSU has been talking so much crap from the get-go, and there has always been this kind of weird vibe between Kim Mulkey and Dawn Staley. I don't know if you can call it a rivalry because Mulkey hasn't won a whole lot, but I've seen a lot of LSU fans saying some not so nice things about South Carolina women's team on Twitter. So I mean, if it's a massive game, Mike, and I think on Super Bowl Sunday the fans are going to show up. It's going to be a sellout, most likely. You would think, because it is such a big game, and I know Dawn's she's gonna try to keep it quick. Hopefully, keep her team out of foul trouble so she can get to her Eagles as quickly as possible.
Good. We're all trying to. We just got the new TV. I want to watch the game too. Let's go.
Exactly.
Don.
And I mean,
wrap this thing up.
It'll be done before the big game comes on.
Hopefully, there won't be as many foul calls. Hopefully, there's not 40 plus foul calls. That's what you're trying to get at, Intern Joe.
Dawn's certainly gonna be. It's gonna be the first time you're gonna see Dawn not begging for foul calls, I think. But no, I mean, like in today too, I think these games, this team may not, I knock on wood, this team may not lose. So you got to take today and find the negative. Mike, you were kind of touching on it with the free throws. You got to find the negative and really harp on that, because you're not going to really. I mean, for other than LSU, you really don't see a loss in sight. And so you got to find something negative to really.
Because things aren't always as good as they are. They're not always as bad as they are, right?
Exactly.
You hear that saying all the time. Well, if we're going to look at it with USC, 23-0, it's not always as good as it may seem. If that was the case, Dawn Staley would just say, screw us, cancel practice. We don't need to go to practice, girls. You guys are fine, right? That's not the case. This team can still get better. And it's okay to look at these things this way, right? I mean, all that means is that the bar has been risen to a level that we really need to be able to get creative in terms of what we're going to talk about with this team, because they're that damn good. They're that damn good.
They're that good.
But again, they still have some areas that they can get better at. There's no question about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Alan, appreciate the question. We will get to that at our Q&A segment at the end. But I guess transitioning into our fourth segment, going back to the men's team, I guess fortunately, but I guess what's next for both programs, the men's team and the women's? We can tie them in here too. I know we just kind of touched on it, I guess, the LSU game, but what's next for the men's team, Mike? I mean, you have Gigi's live, and obviously he issued his apology, and some kind of disciplinary action coming up. You had a big game from Josh Gray. How does he build on that? Some things, going forward, there are definitely some storylines to watch here. And then we can also tie the women's team in. I guess, how do you finish strong and whatnot? But I guess, Mike, I'll ask you, what's next? How do you respond to this?
Well, you're on a 7-game losing streak. You're 1-9 in conference play, and you got to go travel to Missouri. Was it Tuesday? Mm-hmm. So I think the first thing that we're going to see is we're going to be interested to see. I don't know if there is one for tomorrow. Maybe there's not a press conference for Lamont. Is there, Intern Joe? If you know by any chance?
I do not know. I can check real quick.
So I say that because if there is, and the reason why some of these things, because with basketball season, it's not always as consistent, depending on when they got to play, where they got to play. But I bring that up because there's maybe a possibility that if he does talk about it, he has a chance to talk to the media, being Lamont, he'll talk about it and he'll address it. And he'll say, we're handling it internally. Like, that's why, if Lamont's asked about it, I'm sure he's going to try to downplay it and keep it in-house. Mm-hmm. And you do that because you're trying to protect your guys, right? There's no reason to really – if you're going to punish him, and again, we're just using examples here, by making him sit out the first half or wherever the case may be, you're sending your message. You're taking care of things internally. We saw Frank Martin. He took care of things internally, right? Sindarius Thornwell. You think about different things before. Coaches do it all the time.
Yeah.
Once you do that, you're sending your message. You don't need to go in front of the cameras and say it even more and more. You could say, well, you know what? He made a dumb mistake. He apologized to us and my team. You could say stuff like that. But what I'm trying to get at is I don't expect this to really drag on further than after Tuesday night. I think there might be some local media members because it's out in Missouri, which is across the freaking country and compared to the rest of the SEC.
Yeah.
I don't think that, he's going to really face the South Carolina media members. Not that this is the Boston market or New York market or, Chicago market, LA market, and people are going to be hammering them with these questions. But it could linger into the next time that Lamont talks in front of the local media. But other than that, I think this will be gone. And Lamont will basically say, hey, you know what? He said what he had to. We took care of things. We're moving forward now. That's kind of what I expect.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so too, Mike. You're on the road for your next two, and one of them being Missouri, which is way far away, and the one after that being Ole Miss. So I don't think, the South Carolina media will get Lamont until Vanderbilt at home.
Ashley might be right. I mean, I have not been here this fall. So this is my first time not being covering men's basketball in person. So I really haven't been paying attention to the press conferences. And of course, we know that Frank would have – I'm trying to remember what Frank would do. On Fridays, players would speak. A player or two, and then Frank would speak occasionally. It was more difficult, though, in conference play.
Yeah, we haven't got
a coach by coach thing. Yeah, it's a coach to coach thing. It's preferences. Emily did a tremendous job when she was the SID for men's basketball. I don't know, there's been some change ups there, but hopefully we'll be able to hear from Lamont in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, no, so far, no availability midweek. But yeah, I think next time he'll be in front of the media, the local media at least, will be the 14th. And I mean, this thing will be all wrapped up and done by then at the very least. I think, maybe some of the media at Missouri will ask about it because it is kind of a national thing just because GG's nature, right? Like, because GG is, the biggest thing that's
There could be
happening.
that local media member that wants to ask, and I totally get it.
Yeah, and it's,
I get it.
there are some local media members around here that I think have ties to Missouri, so there could be some telephone going on a little bit to get the question in, and deservedly so. Like, it needs to be asked, and if there isn't any disciplinary action, or even if there is, just kind of get some idea of where Lamont's head was at. I think it needs to be asked. It needs to just, and I'm sure Lamont might mention in his opening statement. He might not. Like, it'll get out there, and I think it'll be wrapped up at the very least by Ole Miss. But if it's still lingering by the time Vandy comes to Columbia, like, I mean, I don't think it will. I think, that would be blowing it off way dragged on beyond the point. But yeah, I think this thing will be wrapped up here pretty soon, and all is good. I'm sure the amends have made. Mike, like you said, your sources have said that Gigi's apologized to Lamont, and I think it's a learning experience for the both of them, right? And Lamont understands that maybe he needs to be a little bit harder on Gigi, and maybe he needs to pay a little bit more of a closer eye. And I mean, obviously after the game, that was during his presser. Like, I was sitting there and I remember looking at my phone and it said Gigi Jackson live on Instagram right now, and I'm like, oh boy. So
we've heard some coaches. It's not even. I mean, we talk about Frank, but it's not even a Frank thing. I mean, every coach has their own coaching style, and what we've seen a lot of the time from coaches is that they're usually harder on their best players. So again, that's not to say that Lamont is capable of being hard on Gigi. I think it's just the circumstances. I think he's trying to help him learn what being a college athlete's all about because of how young he is. And I know that some people just don't want to hear that. It's not an excuse. Again, if you're just joining us, it is not an excuse for what he said and what he did. There should be consequences. But that doesn't change the fact of how young he is. He's 18 years old. He just turned 18. He made a dumb mistake, but it's not like he made this mistake where it's like, all right, you know what? Kicked off the team. No, he made a dumb mistake. Okay? He made a dumb mistake, and he's still one of the best players, if not the best player. He still is the best player on this team. So, what are you going to do? Yeah. You do this. As a coach, you send a message, and, you might have to be a little bit tougher on him. I don't know exactly what was said in that meeting between those two, but what I can tell you, though, is if I'm Lamont, I let him know, like, hey, look, you're going to have to earn back some of my trust, okay? That leash that I gave you, it's going to be a little bit tighter now. And how Gigi responds back to that will tell us a lot. I expect him to respond the right way. I do. Because, again, there are things right now that he's going through that, never mind me, you, some of the people that are on here, could be 30, 40, 50 years old, whatever, they've never had to deal with before. Never. He's dealing with this at a ripe age of 18, okay? So, again, I think he's going to bounce back fine. He comes from a good family, right? Had an opportunity to cover him in high school. He comes from a good family. He's got good people in his life. I think he's going to be all right. I think it's going to be a good teaching moment, as cliche as that line is. I think that's what it's going to be. And I don't know how this all kind of plays out.
Yeah, Mike, I firmly agree with that. And then I guess going to our last segment, our Q&A section, we've got all of your questions that you guys have asked throughout the show. Feel free to ask some more. Mike and I will be live again on Tuesday for more football news. So if you have some football questions, feel free to ask. But we will be live on Tuesday, as usual, for our Talking Tuesday nights. I know Mike's coming off the bench for Colin tonight for the Hard Fowl, which we appreciate. But I guess getting to the first question, does undressing of your team coach warrant a disciplinary action? We kind of answered that already. Yeah, absolutely. You think so?
And just real quickly, I didn't see it necessarily as a shot at Lamont.
Yeah, neither.
As I've said, I think some people interpreted that way.
Mm-hmm.
And again, from conversations I've had with people close to the situation, based on that meeting, that's not how it was viewed. Internally, at least. It was more viewed as he's just frustrated. He felt like he deserves to have the ball more. He wants to have the ball more. That's the way that was kind of viewed. And again, that's how I interpreted it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it was interpreted as, kind of a frustration thing. Like, after the game, you still have all of those endorphins rushing and all of that, the momentum in your body or, running through your veins and your blood's still pumping a little bit. So guys are going to say, some dumb stuff, especially,
Sports science intern Joe over here. Look at
I
you.
know, right? Yeah, journalism kid, bringing up the science. I think it's endorphin, something like that. I don't know. My 5th grade science teacher would not be proud of me right now.
Keep it rolling, intern Joe.
Absolutely. Do key players like G.G. Jackson have a higher threshold for behavioral problems? Mike, you want to take a crack at that one?
I mean, I'm not, Sigma Freud here. We're not going to friggin' break down the, the way a kid thinks come in,
Hierarchy.
From a psychology standpoint. I think what I'll say, though, is I think not from a behavioral situation. I just think there's probably more, it's more, and this is more of a stigma, but I think it could become more likely that there are, a player of his caliber could be more egotistical. Now, again, that's not saying that is the case with him. That is the stigma that when you are one of the top players in the country, that you're coming out of high school and, all eyes are on you and, everyone's telling you how great you are. So I say all that because, again, I think that with this, I don't think that Gigi necessarily is egotistical. I think some people are going to see that. I think Gigi is a competitor. He's not used to losing. He came from a very talented high school at Ridgeview that all they did was freaking win championships. And he's been the guy, and things have always gone well for him. He's been hit with adversity now. He's been thrown into the mix, and he's been told, hey, you're going to be the guy. The whole city is looking at you to be that guy. And things aren't shaken out to be the way that I think maybe he envisioned them. We knew that it was going to be a challenge regardless if Gigi was here or not for Lamont Paris in his first year. But I think more than anything, I think it's just a challenge of making sure that you have these young players that come in, whether they are of the caliber of G.G. Jackson or any player that comes into college, and you kind of make sure that they understand, like, hey, look, a lot of people are going to be looking at you in one way or another, right? Social media, this and that. You need to realize that the attention that you're getting, it's a good thing, but make sure you don't lose sight of what's the most important, and that's being able to develop as an athlete and being able to help your team win games. The attention, if you do good things, the attention is going to come. The attention's going to be coming. But if you chase the attention first, right? If you chase the attention first, you're going to be doing things all backwards. And it's very likely that you're going to just basically just throw up all over yourself. So that's what I would say to that. Not specifically directed at Gigi, but I think that's something in the ego standpoint when you're coming out of high school and you're just one of the top players and everyone's told you your whole life how good you are.
Yeah, I think in terms of like the threshold from like a team standpoint, I think it's what Big Red was maybe getting at here. I don't know. But like in terms of like, does the star player have, I guess more leniency? Not necessarily. It just kind of depends on the coach. Like obviously with a guy like Gigi, usually if you do have some vets in the room, they're going to be harder on the star player when he's a young guy like that. And, has, again, I don't want to use the word ego because Gigi really doesn't have one, but like it has, some self-confidence, usually you see the vet kind of bring the head down a little bit, but no, I wouldn't say so. Just because he's your star player, I think, you treat him like anybody else or just like, or even, just to set an example, you were to make the suspension or the disciplinary action a little bit longer. I'm not sure. But on to the next question from Alan. Has Coach Parrish recruited anyone for next year? Yes, actually. 2 guys that have signed in the 2023 class already are Colin Murray Boyles and Arden Conyers. They both are from Columbia. Colin Murray Boyles is from Wasatch. I'm saying that wrong. Forgive me. Small forward, 6'7", 200 pounds, 3-star. And then Arden Conyers, he's a 6'6" shooting guard, 175 pounds, another 3-star. Those guys rank 2 and 3 in the state of South Carolina for the 2023 class. I think there's a lot of upside. And our guy Jamie Shaw talked about them at length. We posted the clip on our YouTube, so go check that out. Our whole interview with Jamie Shaw, our man. He's the best. So, Mike, I'm not sure if you had anything on that, but I guess kind of rolling along here from Big Red again. Does a coach's style reflect the team as a whole? Personally, I think so. Yeah. And you see that with players, coaches, and stuff like that. And, I think with Lamont, we've already kind of seen it a little bit. This team has been able to kind of work together a little bit more. And obviously, it's hard to pick out in a loss. You can't really, see the kind of inner workings and the culture of it all when they're losing, because it's tough losing 7 in a row. But I hate to keep bringing up Frank, Mike, but Frank's teams were always hard nosed and very, kind of physical, very, I don't want to say disciplined, because Lamont's teams or Lamont's team is pretty disciplined too for the most part. They're getting there, but Frank's team, held no bars. They really didn't mess around. So I definitely think a coach's style reflects on the team and the culture as a whole.
Yeah, and it doesn't matter what the sport is. I mean, we see this more so in football, and I feel like we talk about it more so in football.
Yeah.
When a head coach goes in front of the media, right? Whether it's a Bill Belichick or it's a Shane Beamer, right? It doesn't matter what level it is, how they project out to the media, how they project out in terms of just talking. It's what they are trying to basically say to their team of how they want them to go about things, right? So, I bring those two teams up because obviously I've had a chance to cover both of them this past year. They're different, okay? You don't have to do it a certain way. Of course, we know that for a long period of time, it's worked for Belichick and the Patriots. We're seeing with Shane Beamer, he does things a little bit differently. And as we've seen, he's been able to have success in his short period of time at South Carolina. So I use those examples because it's the same exact way from a basketball standpoint. What you see with Lamont, and Lamont, obviously, he's not new to speaking in front of the cameras, but at the same time, too, he's speaking in front of more. He's speaking in front of more people than he was over at Chattanooga. So I bring that up because I do feel like he's still getting comfortable with all of that. But at the same time, too, what you can see from how he goes about things and watching his mannerisms during the game, that's an extension of what he wants this team to be. And he wants to send a message to his players. And that can evolve over time. Don't get me wrong. I don't expect him to come out like we mentioned with Frank. I don't expect him to go out there and stomp his feet and yell at players. Like, that's Frank's style. Okay? That's Frank's style. There's nothing wrong with that. That's Frank's style. He's trying to obviously figure out what works at South Carolina, just like what works when you live in one place and you work in another place, right? The way that you talk to people, the way that you interact, the way that you go about business, it might work at one place compared to another part of the country. So I think he's still figuring out how he wants to go about things at South Carolina, but at the same time, too, at the end of the day, you are who you are. And I think what we've seen so far from Lamont, that is who he is.
Yeah, 100%. I couldn't have said it any better. I think that was a good analogy there, too, with Beamer, too, because, I mean, we've talked about it on Tuesdays. It radiates off of anybody in that program. Another question from Big Red. Were we as fans spoiled by the Final Four appearance and now expect that kind of results every game? I guess for me personally, I was not here for that, Final Four run. And just kind of looking at it from the outsider's perspective, I guess having that level of success, it certainly does lead to some expectation, sure. But it's been a good while since that Final Four run has happened and whatnot. And there's been a whole regime change. I think towards the end of Frank's tenure, there was definitely that expectation of, yeah, we've seen what he can do. And, this guy can lead us back there. So I think there was that expectation. But I think maybe where the growing pains are coming from now is just it's a new program. It's the rebuild. Nobody likes rebuilding. And so,
No.
It's really hard to get on board with, especially when you have a guy like Gigi Jackson that's supposed to be the prodigal son and the next great South Carolina basketball player. It's frustrating for sure.
I don't think anyone wants to hear this, but yeah, being able to reach the Final Four, yeah, you were freaking spoiled. You were spoiled. You're a program that historically does not make the tournament consistently, okay? You're not Kansas. You're not Duke. You're not North Carolina, okay? So I think being able to go as far as they did, it certainly gave Frank probably more, I don't know, job security towards the end of his tenure, right? So I bring that up because let's not act like the Final Four didn't help Frank out. Okay, he'd be the first one to tell that, to admit that and tell you that. But I also think, too, that because of that, it gave South Carolina fans this taste. And don't get me wrong, I mean, that was my first year down there, experiencing that. Women's team won the championship too. Because of that, you get that taste, you want to get back to it. You want to have that taste again. Okay. So, and I've had this conversation, and it's a conversation that I feel like it's kind of like arguing what's the ideal pizza look like from a topping standpoint, right? What do you put on your pizza to make it the absolute best, right? You're going to have an argument about it. I think with South Carolina, and I've gone back and forth on this with people, you know, some feel like, oh, they should make it maybe, you know, twice every 5 years or one, you know. If you're able to make it twice in 10 years, that's good. That would be like the bottom line. And then I'd say 3 and 10. I'd say 3 and 10. So again, is that what people want to hear? No. Is that what people want to settle for? No, and you shouldn't settle for that. I'm just telling you the reality of it. Now, certainly South Carolina is a long ways away from that right now. We understand that. But again, know who you are, right? Realize what you need to do. The reality is South Carolina needs to bring in talent. We know that. We knew that before the start of the season. We knew that regardless if Gigi Jackson was going to be here. They need to be able to bring in some talent. Lamont Paris needs to be able to have the type of success that he had. Obviously, talent level could be a little bit different, right? Because you're SEC versus Chattanooga, that he had when he was at Chattanooga with the transfer portal. You need to be able to do things over here to be able to get things going. So, again, I would love to see South Carolina be a team that makes the tournament every year, if not every other year. I think it is not, I mean, football special. We know what baseball means to this state as well, especially the city. But if March Madness for men's basketball, women, it's a given right now. We're spoiled with that. If they can make the tournament, just goodness. 3 times in 10 years, I'd take it.
Oh, yeah.
I'd take it. Again, because I've covered this team, this is my 8th year, 7th year, whatever the case may be. They've only been to the tournament once. So let's do that math out. If you're able to make it 3 times in 10 years, it's not bad. It's better than where they are right now.
Absolutely. And I mean, I guess concluding on that point is like there's the nature of how tough it is to win in the NCAA tournament. It's brutal. I mean, you see upsets every year. It's ridiculous. Michael's question, how does the baseball team look going into this year? I am very high on this baseball team. Mike, I know you haven't really gotten to watch a little bit. Maybe you've read a little bit of my insider's notes.
I talk with the King. I talk with Kingston.
Yep.
He's fun. I'll tell you what, the arms they have, we know that this could be a very talented team, right? I mean, it seems like how many times over the last couple of years have we kept saying, all right, oh, they have the arms, they don't have the bats. Oh, they have the bats, they don't have the arms, right? The arms this year, I don't want to say are elite. I think that's a little, getting too carried away. And there's some guys that as we talk about with football intern Joe, there needs to be, more proven talent before we get to that level of calling it elite. But they have a very, very good rotation. They have very good depth in pitching in general. How well and how consistent can they be with hitting? I think that's the question. And if they can do that, this is a team that I expect that can make a deep run. They have the bodies to do it. They have some very good coaches, too, on that staff with Kingston. Some very good coaches on that staff. I think they have the pieces to be a very successful team. They know what winning is. They know what it looks like. They have guys on that staff that know what it looks like, especially at South Carolina. I'm excited. I'm very excited to see what this team does because I can't get excited to watch the Red Sox this year. They're going to be a bunch of bumps. So hopefully the Gamecocks can give us something excited to watch this spring.
Yeah, same here with my White Sox. I mean, we'll see. We still got Timmy Anderson and whatnot. I could give you all my White Sox grievances all for you, but that would take so long. Baseball is going to look really, really good. Their transfer class was really, really good, and Kingston did a great job of it. And also, too, I think the addition of Monty Lee has only helped King a little bit. From what I've seen just within the program and kind of hearing it through my guys, too, is that, Monty is – because obviously Monty he's very light and very fun and very energetic. He's kind of lighting Kingston up. On the other hand, last year from what I saw from Kingston, he was always very serious and very kind of, foot to the floor, if you will, just, not really as light as you would want him to be. I think Monty's lightened him up quite a bit, which is huge. I love to see that. And, I'll share a quick story and then we'll move on. But Monty Lee has a picture of Chris Kyle hanging in the batting cages, and we'll always repeat while they're hitting. You see that man up there? That's a killer. You're the killer. Your bat, that's a 50 cal. And so Monty he's just a goofy dude. I think he livens everybody up. I think he's a big addition. And then obviously you got pitching. This transfer class, Kingston went nuts in the transfer portal, and I think it's going to be really, really good. So watch this team come February, March, April, May. It's going to be really interesting to watch. And I don't want to say Omaha or bust, because this team they didn't do it last year, and this team hasn't really been together. But man, this team is loaded from front to back. Guys competing their butts off right now in scrimmages to get some PT. So I think it's going to be really fun. Games are going to be a whole lot of fun this year. Moving on to Alan's question, I think Dawn only played 8 players today, same as UConn. Wonder why Watkins, Cooper, Hall, etc. didn't get in the game. She played 9. I know that was answered in the comments below, but Watkins, Cooper, Hall played like 4 minutes or so, I believe. But Watkins, Cooper, they're younger. Obviously, Dawn wanted to keep her starters in the game mostly. This is kind of the tournament roster, if you will, when games get close. Watkins is a great player, but she's part of that next generation of players, obviously, because you do have some dominant starters right now that can make plays for you. So moving on, I guess our last question from Tiger Kem. Do you think College Game Day will come for the LSU game? Absolutely, I think they will. The only reason I would say they wouldn't is because if they're doing something with Super Bowl or whatever, but I think this is one of the biggest women's basketball games in the country, if not the whole year. So if they don't, I would be shocked. I don't know. I mean, it is kind of a loaded day with Super Bowl Sunday and everything, and so the game is obviously going to be.
I think from a talent, I think from the competition standpoint, it's a no-brainer. If it doesn't happen, though, realize that it has nothing to do with the fact that women's basketball is being overlooked or anything like that. It's just, let's call it for what it is. It's the friggin' Super Bowl. And a lot of these I'll say this too, as someone that has been back and forth the last couple of years in TV, outside of TV, it's not even about, it's a lot of these companies, and I know from an ESPN standpoint in particular, they've done a lot of cutbacks too. So they're trying to do everything they can to be able to find ways in terms of justifying travel and this and that. So again, it's not the answer probably that some people want to hear, and hopefully game day is there. But if for whatever reason it's not, know that it has nothing to do with the fact that, like, it's no one cares about women's basketball. It's like, I think it would be the same deal if it was men's basketball. Okay. Like I still think like ESPN is going to invest a lot of money in the Super Bowl. Obviously it's not on ESPN, the Super Bowl that is. But you might have an opportunity for them to still come out there, but I don't know. If I had to put a percent on it, I would say 40%, maybe they're there. I don't know. 40 still decent though.
Yeah. And you're right, Mike. Like from a talent standpoint, obviously they would be here, but Super Bowl's tough. Again, it's a weird schedule. Like they gotta talk to Ray Tanner and Chance Miller. They gotta get that game moved for next year.
I wish honestly, and I know that TV has a big role with it. Yeah. But man, I wish the game was at noon. I think that would be better.
Yeah, games is it at 1 or is it 3:30?
2.
Oh, it's at 2. Yeah, okay. So
it would be great if they could just get that thing and because look, the reality is, and there's some people that probably don't even watch the NFL or are going to watch the Super Bowl, or maybe they're just women's basketball fans, right? But the reality is, I mean, the NFL it runs the NFL runs sports in America. Like it's just the reality of it. There's nothing that even comes close. When you look at the money that is generated, and I can tell you right now, from someone that grew up watching professional sports and being around that, being up here and covering the NFL, it's just different. The amount of money that's invested into it. I mean, it is, they're making a lot of money. And when you make a lot of money, there's going to be networks that are going to want to be able to take advantage of that as well. And they're going to try to do what they feel like will generate the most buzz, the most ratings, the most clicks. And when you have the Super Bowl on that day, unfortunately. And I think a lot of you guys understand that. But again, I say all this because it would be disappointing if game day isn't there, but I don't know if it will happen just because of the circumstances with it falling on that day.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And lastly, yes, Tiger Ken, we get you. You are officially on the record as not a Clemson fan. But yeah, that is it. Everyone, thanks for tuning in. I'm Intern Joe. That's Mike Yuva. Join us on Talking Tuesday nights on Tuesday. I'm excited to get back to some football talk. It's going to be good, Mike. Should be a good show.
It was good.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for coming off the bench for our guy.
Intern Joe, can you let people know if there's going to be, if you can call in or doing a show next week or not, or not sure?
I'm pretty sure we will. I'm not exactly sure. So stay tuned to Twitter and those outlets. Colin and I haven't talked about it quite yet. So yeah,
wow, competing against the Super Bowl. Look at you guys.
I know. I'm not sure what we're gonna do. So we might move it to Monday. I'm not sure. I haven't talked to Colin.
I know I kind of put you on the spot, but I'm just letting people know because I know we still have some people watching here, just in case.
Yeah, and I know I was thinking about it too. Before I was getting ready to close this thing up. I'm like, which direction are we going? Colin and I haven't decided yet. So stay tuned to Gamecock Central, my Twitter, Colin's Twitter. We'll let you guys know. But yeah, I don't know. We'll see. But anyways, I'm Intern Joe. That's Mike Yuva. Thank you guys for tuning in. Have a great rest of your night.